It's in the final segment. International Social Justice Day. That's where we are. How has South Africa fared in ensuring this in our country? Social justice is an underlying principle for peaceful and prosperous coexistence within and among nations. We advance social justice when we remove barriers that people face because of gender, age, race, ethnicity, religion, culture, and even disability. But how far has South Africa come with enduring concerns around poverty, crime, poor education, healthcare? In fact, there are many more that we can add to that list. What's being done to improve social justice? Our guest this afternoon, Ayanda, project leader for Inclusive Economics at the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation. She's also one of the editors of the Transformation Audit publication, which was launched today and focuses on confronting exclusion by unpacking issues of, amongst others, intergenerational justice. So lots to unpack here. Ayanda, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. To the listeners that are tuned into the show, it's the final segment of Daily Download with me, MJ Lee, Muhammad Junaid, Shafiq, the entire team still on board. Producer Khadija Davids, sound engineer Rizan Samsudin, our on-air assistant Nazima Adams will access your calls and transfer you to us. 021 699 1786 for your comments. 32783. SMS is charged at 1 rands. Those free ones unfortunately do not apply. If you're socially active, you can post your comments on our Facebook page. Tweet us at Radio 786 online. You can also tweet me at MJ Lee Kung Fu. Ayanda, let's start off with International Social Justice Day. How should we and how are we upholding this day in South Africa?
Okay, I think for us in South Africa, I mean, the issue of social justice has a big relevance to South Africa and where we're at the moment. I think that, as you know, we do have serious issues relating to people not being able to access employment, not being able to access opportunities that will give them entry into the market, issues to basic access to basic services. So all of these issues related to social justice does have a bearing for us as South Africans. And I think in terms of how we need to engage, we definitely need to get citizens, to mobilize citizens to engage on these issues on the various platforms, but particularly to engage our leaders and to participate in terms of issues relating to social justice and find those spaces where citizens can voice their concerns, spaces where their views can stand on par and be heard at those levels where it actually matters the most.
Now, Ayanda, many would ask the question, how many of our South Africans, with respect, citizens, communities, societies, are truly aware of International Social Justice Day? And is there enough conscientizing, or are we facing enough problems in South Africa that we need to grapple with first before we actually look at commemorating this day? Would that perhaps be the wrong point of call?
Well, I doubt that South Africans, are quite aware of this day and what it actually means and what it signifies. I mean, if you were to just go on Twitter right now and check if it's something that South Africans are talking about, it's certainly not, they're not certainly talking about this day, but they are at least, which is quite promising, they are engaging with issues of social justice. There is a consciousness around issues of social justice. Just by going in these social media platforms, people are tuned in to their rights and how things ought to be. So I think that's a good thing. That's a good sign. As much as they might not know so much about the actual day itself, but at least we are engaging. South Africans are engaging with these issues, and people are beginning to ask very critical questions relating to their rights, very critical questions relating to the government, what the role of the government is, and also keeping government into account on the provision of services, on governance issues, on corruption, and all of those things. And also we're seeing, a lot of social movements that are agitating for rights to access to education, access to basic services, and so forth. So I think in terms of our political culture, it's quite promising that people are engaging at various levels with these issues.
Now, Ayanda, we're talking about service delivery and the fact that probably since mid-2000s, 2004, 2005, we've seen an upsurge in service delivery protests across the board, across communities, across South Africa. Communities have become disillusioned, have become angry, have become frustrated, have also questioned the current administration, also questioning 20 years of integration and democratization. What have we truly benefited therefrom throughout this period? Failure of the current administration to perhaps address the needs seriously of the bulk of communities by and large in a 20-year period. How do we start talking to these communities? Because many would argue, well, talking after 20 years, it should possibly be more action than talking. But how do we start engaging with these communities?
Well, I think in terms of communities and the kind of service delivery that we're seeing, I think on the one hand, we have to admit that if you look at the statistics that have come out even last year, the living conditions, that there have been a delivery, there has been more rollout of services. There are more people, that have housing, that have access to, to water, sanitation, and all of those things. But having said that, though, we really haven't covered the needs to an extent that, we ought to have been, because there's still quite, the backlog is still so huge. There's still people still using the bucket systems, which is totally unacceptable at this point in time of our democracy. So it's really a mixed success story if you look at where we started from in 1994 and where we're at the moment. So I think the question, one needs to really engage with is, have we really performed, to our best ability as we should have from 1994? We heard the president speaking during the State of the Nation address and saying that, we do have a good story to tell. There has been a delivery of services, which cannot be, one cannot deny that delivery of services, but clearly we have not raised, to the level where we ought to have been. And obviously there are a number of issues why delivery is not happening at the pace that it should be. And those issues, as might be attributed to local government capacity. The people that are entrusted to deliver services, do they have the capacity, the know-how, the expertise to manage those funds, and redistribute resources in an efficient kind of manner? But also issues of corruption. To what extent do they play a role, in the lack of the rapid pace that we see in service delivery? So, for me, communities need to be, we see the protest and we see the violent nature of protests, and then we have to ask, is it constructive? What avenues that communities can start to channel their frustrations, ways that are productive and ways that will, in the end, get them solidarity across society, that they can start to see transformation in those kind of issues that they're agitating for. So in one way, there definitely is a need to start to question the capacity of local government, to question issues around accountability, issues around transparency and how those funds are being spent. But also we need to capacitate communities to find more constructive ways of being able to engage within this democracy that we have.
Ayanda, apologies for interjecting. We've got a caller online. Apologies. Let's take some comments. Caller, welcome to the show.
Assalamu alaikum, Junaid. Welcome to your guest also, Junaid. Can we celebrate social justice we must ask ourselves, what is social justice all about? This is the question our community must ask ourselves, because they're not aware. They're only aware of justice, justice in the criminal sense, but not justice in the social sense. We must ask ourselves tonight, why are we in this position that we are in now? If we have noticed for the last couple of months now, the intensification of the strikes, the violence that is taking place in the town. The same thing is happening in the apartheid system also, when it started like this, where the people took to the streets and they burned the tires. Something similar, there's a similarity to what's happening now in this country. Our government, they are 20 years in power, for the last 20 years. They were illiterate when they came into the parliament, This, the nationalist government has to sort of be part of their government in order to show them how to govern. To govern. It wasn't a government of national unity. It was a government of where the previous apartheid government was part of the ANC government to show them the ropes and the tricks and the what about governance. So these boys are making a lot of mistakes. And they have become, some of them have become so corrupt, And this is where the problem lies, you see. The ideas of the government are not well liked by those that had the power. And those ideas are coming into fruition now, that they are getting wary and they have to get rid of the government. And how are they doing it? Indirectly and indiscreetly, by fomenting. I'm sure they are part of this violent strikes and all that. So who's to be blamed? The government. It is all about regime change. Because South Africa, the government of South Africa, not all politicians, but most of the South African government is not towing the line of what America wants or what the Anglo-American fraternity wants. So these are issues people must also look at, because this is what I'm seeing here. Social justice, we cannot celebrate it at this point in time, because the ideas of what this government has in store is not coming to fruition too soon, to satisfy the masses. Inshallah, we can only hope and pray that they will get their share also of the wealth. But the thing is, we must be wary of these issues, because social justice, who started social justice? Who started the World Day social justice? There's a question you must ask. It is all of encouraging people to stand up now and say, listen, we need this, we need that. But why is this thing so intense? Why is it so intensified, this violent strikes? Who's behind all this? So we must also be careful, because the colonialists ruled us for 300 years. They kept us out of the mainstream politics. We were only meant to be the laborer and the slave. Now that we are getting to that power, they are all doing everything now to destroy that. So we must be careful for that. Shukran, Junaid, that I listen to you.
All right, thanks so much to the caller for the comments. Continue to call us 021-699-1786. 32783. SMS is charged at 1 rands. We're asking the question, how has South Africa fared in ensuring social justice as a nation, as a country? It's International Social Justice Day. We're chatting to Ayanda, project leader for inclusive economies at the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation. Also one of the editors of the Transformation Audit publication. The lines are open. SMS line remains open. We're going to go to the headlines. We continue shortly.
Radio 786, 100.4 FM stereo.
Radio 786, news that matters.
Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon from the Radio 786 News Desk. I am Ruqayya Syria. The former chairperson of the Western Cape Community Policing Forum believes his arrest is an attempt to intimidate him. Hanif Lunat was detained on Tuesday on charges of intimidation and defeating the ends of justice. He was released today. The body of an 11-year-old girl has been found in an abandoned building in Lower Station in Maitland. The discovery was made yesterday. Police Captain FC van Wyk says a child from Manenberg was reported missing on Tuesday evening. Mining union AMCU has vowed to continue its strike against the world's top 3 platinum producers, a fight the union's president has described as a fight for survival by workers. A drug lab has been discovered at a flat in Bellville. The City of Cape Town says equipment and chemicals to manufacture tik were found following a tip-off. A 35-year-old woman has been arrested. That's all the news making headlines at this hour. Our next news broadcast follows at 6 o'clock.
It's the Radio 786 One Up Cash and Carry Mini Sports Festival on the 29th and 30th of March 2014. An extraordinary family event hosted at the Turfel Sports Complex, corner Belgravia and Lansdowne Roads. Various sporting codes, food stalls, entertainment and shop till you drop. To secure your exhibitor space, contact Siham Survey at 021 699 1786. Mondays to Fridays between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. for the Radio 786 One Up Cash and Carry Mini Sports Festival.
Need to book a flight to Durban or London, or even a safari to Kruger National Park? How about a family holiday to Istanbul or Dubai? At Legend Tours, we pride ourselves with quality service and affordable prices. We will ensure that you get the best experience and value for money, local or international. For professional service and competitive rates, visit our website legendtours.co.za or call 021 704 9140 or email holidays@legendtours.co.za. Legend Tours, your preferred travel management company.
Come to Boards for Africa and meet our knowledgeable sales team for all your building cupboard needs. We specialize in kitchen and bedroom cupboards in an array of colors and accessories. We are manufacturers of Devon doors, raised panel doors, shaker doors and PVC wrap doors, and provide cutting and edging services. Boards for Africa. Find us at Old Lansdowne Road, Philippi, behind the Philippi Police Station. Or call us on 021 691 7660. Just arrived. We have an exciting new range of gloss boards in a range of colors in store now.
Mr. Shabalala is now ready for your interview. You may go through.
Maybe I shouldn't have applied for this job.
This is the promotion you've been working for.
Yeah, I know, but it feels like they want to give the job to someone else.
Relax. All the omega-3 from the Lucky Star you've been eating has you sharper than ever.
How can you be so sure?
No more questions. Smile.
When can you start?
Eat Lucky Star. It's high in omega-3 so you can be mega.
If you're looking to do something to get your heart pumping, you're in luck. It's the Radio 786 One Up Cash and Carry Mini Sports Festival on the 29th and 30th of March at the Turfel Sports Complex, corner of Turfel and Belgravia Road. Bring along family and friends and participate in a variety of sports from soccer, touch rugby, volleyball, cricket and the 7.86-kilometer health run and walk. There'll be loads of food stalls and activities for the kids too. So join Radio 786 for a weekend of fun at the Turfel Sports Complex on the 29th and 30th of March at the Radio 786 One Up Cash and Carry Mini Sports Festival, proudly supported by the City of Cape Town.
Radio 786, 100.4 FM stereo.
5:36, about 19 minutes before we conclude this Thursday edition. Daily download right here on Radio 786, the frequency of 100.4 FM. Become part of the conversation. Give us a call, 021 699 1786. 32783. SMS is charged at 1 rand. It's International Social Justice Day. How has South Africa fared in ensuring this in the country? We're chatting to Ayanda, project leader for inclusive economies at the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation. Ayanda, we took a caller with some comments before the 5:30 headlines. And in amongst others, the caller referred to social justice that cannot be celebrated in South Africa. Too much still needs to be done. We still need to overcome so much. We still have plenty of shackles to break through and break down. Valid comments? Your take on that?
Social justice cannot be celebrated. I think that, there are things that we have done well that I think we can celebrate as South Africans, as I've said earlier. But I also think that we still need to do more, much more. I think perhaps what has, as the caller was talking about, the levels of violence that we're seeing and somehow suggesting that, there are third elements, that have other agendas that might be sparking up the violence and so forth. I think in terms of the violence that we see, we also need to be cognizant of the political culture that we had inherited from our past, where institutions of the state really did not have credibility, and people not feeling that, they could go through these channels, or use these institutions to agitate and all of those sort of things. So this relationship that citizens had with the state, that people actually didn't have any rights, and how that culture of violence in terms of citizens articulating their issues, and how that culture was cultivated over time. And coming into our new democracy, what we then see is we have these institutions that have been set up, which are wonderful on paper and are designed to be inclusive. You look at our constitution, it provides, it has provisions and frameworks for participation at the local government, where communities interface directly with the government. There are platforms, there are spaces that are created where communities can plan together with their council, and they can, engage in governance issues at the local government level. However, what we then see, as much as these provisions and frameworks are there, what we have been seeing, even from our own data, the Reconciliation Barometer survey that we do, when we ask people to rate institutions and ask them about the perception of public institutions, what we've seen now over time is how that trust and confidence in institutions is declining, particularly, institutions of local government, the police, for example, and we know what has been happening with the police recently, where, citizens fear the police, and they've totally, starting to lose confidence and trust in the police and these institutions of government. And so what that then, has creates in society is a sense of, where people do not trust these institutions. They do not trust that these institutions, they will be able to be heard, their voices will be heard, that these institutions do indeed, are designed to serve their interests, and people start to see these institutions, some of them, particularly local government, as serving, political careers in some instances, and serving a minority of the political connected and so forth. And so for me, I think the level of violence that we see speaks directly to the issue of institutions, what has become of our institutions, how do people perceive these institutions, and how do we then start to rebuild these institutions so that citizens, if there are issues that are emerging, that citizens do feel that they have a voice, they do feel that these institutions are independent, that they are credible institutions. And so for me, what is very fundamental that we need to do when we're talking about social justice, and we're concerned about protests and violence and all of those things, we have to get our institutions right. Particularly in terms of independence and credibility as well. Otherwise, we'll continue to see the levels of violence that we see in society with regards to social services and so forth.
Very good points indeed. An SMS pops up. We have too much on our plate, MJ, especially unemployment and service delivery to even begin to celebrate Social Justice Day. Too much on our plate, no time to celebrate Social Justice Day. Ayanda says the SMS.
No time to celebrate social justice.
Is that perhaps just frustration communities have? Understandably, in South Africa, our communities have gone through a lot and continue to go through plenty. So perhaps this is frustration speaking. It's also disillusioned communities speaking. You know, saying we are battling with so much already. So perhaps the oversight is, why should we still be celebrating a Social Justice Day?
I think there's a point to be said about that. You know, I think that these are very, very difficult times that we're living in terms of the economic climate. It's very tough. There are no jobs. We have young people, you know, that are sitting at home. They don't have access to even go and study further. They don't have access to the market. And you have to ask yourself, what then becomes the future of those young people? We know that, you know, there's about, the latest statistics reported about 3 million young people between the ages 15 to 24 that were literally sitting at home. They were not engaged in any kind of productive activity like training, education, employment, and so forth. And those are real issues that people are sitting with. But also, you know, as I said, there are no jobs, and at the same time, we're seeing that, you know, things are just getting more expensive. You know, food prices are also going up high, and people are really feeling the pinch. And so one also understands this kind of disillusionment that people are feeling, that, you know, they want more. And we often hear that, as I've also said earlier on, we hear about the successes, but clearly, you know, things are so tough that people actually want more to be done, and to really start to see real transformation happening in their lives, particularly around socioeconomic rights and so forth.
5:45, about 9 minutes before we conclude this Thursday edition daily download on 100.4 FM with me, MJ Lee Mohammed Junaid Shafiq. Give us a call, 0216991786. Social justice is an underlying principle for peaceful and prosperous coexistence within and among nations. Now, how is South Africa fared in ensuring that this is actually the case in our country? 32783 SMS is charged at 1 rands. Our guest online, Ayanda, project leader for inclusive economies at the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation. She's also one of the editors of the Transformation Audit publication. Now, Ayanda, some activists have compiled a list of 10 social justice issues that we need to tackle, and if we can overcome it, we ultimately will become champions of social justice. And right at the top of that list, Ayanda, is Marikana. Then other aspects also included in the 10 social justice issues: corporate accountability, women, health, housing, education, food security, disabled people's rights, racism, and then finally, in at number 10, the right and will to protest. But Ayanda, of concern, right on top, Marikana.
Okay. Hello?
Yes.
I mean, I think the Marikana issue is quite a big one. I'm not surprised that it's on top, because if you look at the Marikana, you know, victims, they're still waiting for justice.
Mm.
They haven't received, we heard last year that the state wasn't really prepared or willing to actually, pay for their legal fees and all of those things. And from that, we have to then ask, those questions relating to social justice. So if you're poor and you can't, something like this happens to you and you can't afford lawyers' fees and all of those things, what rights do you really have? You do have the rights in the Constitution, but what do those rights mean if you actually, cannot exercise them? So I think for me, the Marikana issue, because it's still so unresolved, is a big one. It's a big one, but also speaks to the fact that, those miners, they've been working there, they are mining and risking their lives on a daily basis. And how we see the distribution of the profits that come out, the fact that it's totally disproportionate. The miners that are working for this mining company, but if you have to look at the conditions that they're living under, you have to then, ask some really serious questions about social justice issues, So if you are going and risking your life every day and digging up minerals and so forth, but then you have to go home to living conditions that are not up to standard, you're not able to take your kids to good schools, provide good education for them and so forth. So you see this, these injustices in society play themselves out. So I'm really not surprised that issue becomes a key issue. And we're seeing already now what's happening within the mining sector, where people are really starting to question the distribution of income and wages and so forth. What is the value of their work, and why do they have to work so hard and risk their lives every day, and still have to go back to very, very poor living conditions. We've heard, we also saw the visuals of just the type of housing dwellings that these miners were living under. And it's really, really, really shocking. And these are the things that we need to fix in our society, to think about how do we create a more equitable society, one that is based on principles of fairness, one that really looks at how do we lift up those people at the bottom, and how do we redress poverty and inequality. Mm-hmm. And I think the Marikana serves as a very, very classic example where we're really seeing a situation of executives taking home, bonuses over $1 million, and we have people here risking their lives each and every day for what, really? For what? So these are these are the questions that people are starting to engage with very, very critically around the mining sector and so forth.
10 to 6, about 4 minutes, and we conclude our conversation. Daily download this Thursday, 20th of February, 100.4 FM. Now, Yanda, perhaps in the closing few minutes, take us through the Transformation Audit publication. I understand was it launched today?
Yes.
Okay. It focuses on confronting exclusion by unpacking issues of, in and amongst others, intergenerational justice. Maybe just talk us through that in the closing 4 minutes. Okay,
great. So in terms of the intergenerational justice, we also, as part of the launch today, we had economist Dr. Iraj Abidin, who came and spoke on the piece that he contributed for the publication, exactly on this theme of intergenerational justice. And essentially, it's really looking at our society and reflecting on how on the distribution of resources in our society, asking questions about the extent to which the way we manage resources does, in actual fact, consider the welfare of future generations. How do we manage those resources as the current generation that we have at our disposal to ensure that the well-being of future generation can be preserved? And when we look at the whole issue of intergenerational justice, it talks to the kinds of investments that we need to make. And some of these investments that need to be made to secure the welfare of future generations are financially related. Some of them are non-financial related. If you're looking at the financial sort of kinds of investments, we have to think about investing in human capital, investing in skills, investing in education. So how do we turn around poverty? So if we don't have a society that's more skilled, a society that's more educated, how are we going to be able to leave a legacy, an inheritance for future generations, to be able to compete in a global economy that's quite competitive, but that's also quite knowledge-based and also very much skills intensive. And so it's looking at the kinds of investments that we ought to be making, whereas at the moment a lot more of our budget goes into things such as social grants actually, and we're not really investing as much as we possibly could in other avenues that would boost the economy. For example, the kind of infrastructure that the economy would require, the rail infrastructure that enables, for economic activity and more productivity, and therefore you get your economic growth and possibly you get your jobs and redistribution in that sense. And so it's looking at the management of resources that are financial, but also what we highlight in this issue is also looking at the education issue, the fact that if we look at the kind of investments that we're making in education and looking at global trends relating to education, you can see that we're in line with those global trends. We are making substantial monetary investments in education. However, what then concerns us that if you make an investment, you're obviously expecting certain kinds of returns from that investment. In terms of your education, you invest so that you can have a much more educated, a much more skilled labor force. However, we're not getting that kind of, those kinds of returns from our education because it's just not functioning to the level that it ought to be functioning. We're looking at the relevance of the curriculum that young people are learning at the school. Is our curriculum, still relevant to the needs of a global competitive economy? Or are kids learning in school things that are totally irrelevant, that are not going to serve the needs of the economy? But we're already seeing that the results that come out every year, we see kids, there are few kids that are coming out of the school with a matric certificate of good quality, with maths passes, with science passes, whereas we do know that we need more engineers, we need more scientists, we need innovation and technology and all of those things for us to be able to create jobs, for us to be able to compete and so forth in this global economy. So it's looking at those things, how can we invest in those things that are long-lasting, those things that will secure the future for the generations to come. And it's also looking at not just the financials that I've just talked about, the financial investments I've spoke about, but also the non-financials. Here, when we talk about the non-financials, we're looking at things like ethics, values. We're looking at institutions that we spoke about earlier, that institutions, what is the purpose of institutions? Institutions are designed to provide the ethical framework for society, that if we see corruption, we know the institutions that we can go to report corruption and so forth. However, what happens when those institutions are so weak, they're not credible, they're not independent, and all of those things, or perceived to be independent? So it's preserving these things, it's preserving these institutions for the welfare of future generations. It's also engaging in conversations about values. What are our values, and how do we build social capital and raise the level of values in society, not just in the public sector, but also in the private sector. And also what concerns us very much is the fact that, corruption has become so pervasive. It's not just an issue that we see in the public sector, but we also see in the private sector, where we see companies, they're colluding, they price fixing, and so forth. So how, this process of morality that is declining in our society, and how that then, becomes pervasive in various sectors and various institutions of society, and then we ask ourselves the questions: what is the impact of this in the future? What legacy do we want to leave behind for future generations? So the whole idea about intergenerational justice is saying to the current generation that, all social processes, they have, they have implications for the future generations. Typically, when people, talk about intergenerational equity, intergenerational justice, and talking about the future and the welfare of future generations, they typically think of the environment. But this issue has so much relevance to how we do our economics, how we govern our political institutions, and so forth. And so for us, the focus really is going to be on this particular theme of how do we govern in ways and invest in ways that preserve the welfare of future generations and really create sustainability for South Africa, a sustainable future of prosperity, and how do we build, how do we begin to renew our values in society, and also really and having a conversation around living out these values, and this has implications not just for government but each and every citizen. Because we also enable corruption to happen when you think about it. The fact that, the one, that takes the bribe, who's more at fault, the one that takes the bribe or actually the one that offers the bribe? And often at times as citizens we are engaging in corrupt activities. So there is definitely a question to be had, conversations rather to be had around morality, values, or ethics rather than morality, ethics for us in society. So these are the issues that we were touching on in this particular theme of intergenerational justice.
Ayanda, we're going to leave it on that note because I've got 2 minutes to head towards the news. But thanks so much for the chat. It's been very interesting.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. That was our guest, Ayanda, editor of the Transformation Audit publication. A couple of SMSs quickly. Junaid, I tend to agree with Haji Ismail. As long as we have the Oppenheimers and the likes of the Raymond Ackermans of this world pulling the economic strings and having government at their mercy, the poor will remain poor and the rich will become richer. Divide and rule at its best, says Auntie Aisha in the